At night, when all the other engines are gone to those sheds like Titmus sheds or anywhere else on Sodor, you can still hear trains whistling. Some trains run at night, but there's some important trains that do run at night. Some are regular trains, like goods trains, or even passenger trains, like Gordon. Then sometimes takes the express late or something like that. Or late work at the harbour or docks, something like that as well. While some goods train and passenger trains do run at night, goods trains, maybe like coal trains, run at night, but trains like the milk train that Toby pulls at night runs, including the Flying Kipper, which the Flying Kipper is pulled by Henry. Some of the engines like Toby and Henry will see some of their friends at night pulling trains. Toby may be slow, but he's still a good engine to pull the milk. Henry's the strongest engine that pulls the Flying Kipper. He's one of the strongest engines on Sodor to pull the Flying Kipper. Gordon and James pulled it a couple of times, but they didn't enjoy it back then. But a very important train that runs at night is known as the post train or the mail train, whatever you want to call it. The post train is a train that runs at night that delivers mails and parcels. The two engines that pulls it are Percy and James. James joined Percy after the Fat Control needed an engine to take Thomas's place. Thomas used to work with Percy with the post train, but he was removed from it to get to his other chores on Sodor. Edward took it once, but had a rough time with it. So James took the opportunity to help Percy, and from that day it worked fine. The two engines are good friends, and they do like working together pulling the mail. James also uses Rachel as his brake van, the brake van that he saved once from scrap. He uses her for goods trains, and she does use her for pulling the mail train. Percy does use a regular brake van, like always. Percy is the oldest engine that pulls the post train. Well, the wisest one, and he knows everything. And he taught James how to pull it, like he did with Edward and Thomas, pretty much. Since the first day James pulled it, the two of them have worked splendidly together. They always collect their mail from the mail depot, and sometimes from docks or harbors, and they deliver to stations and all that stuff. There hasn't been really a lot of problems. Even one time when James had to do midnight work, Edward offered to take his mail for this, since that was Edward's second time pulling it. Which that was nice where Duck and Henry had their accident on Gordon's Hill. One night in the mail depot, Percy was already gone with the mail. James and Rachel had to wait for the rest of theirs. Henry has to bring it. Now, of course, Henry does pull the Flying Kipper, but before he does, As he goes to the mainland, well, it's Mr. Toyer's railway, and he collects the mail from there. Some of those engines pour the mail, but one night it was running very late. James wasn't happy about this. Calm down, James, said Rachel. Henry will be here soon. I suppose so, said James. Just then a whistle was heard in the distance. That's probably Hen by now. Indeed it was. Henry puffed up beside his best friend. I'm sorry about the delay, James. There was some trouble with the mail on the mainland. Ah, said James. Well, they should be organized like what we sold or do. We can't blame them, said Henry. It wasn't their fault for delayment. Somebody caused it. I don't know, does that mean he couldn't see or something? Ah, said James. I'll make up for lost time. You just watch me go. Oh, just calm down now, said Rachel. And with that, James puffed away to make up for lost time. Well, good luck with the run tonight, you two, said Henry. James was determined to make up for lost time. Rachel decided to go along with it. As they stopped at every station, the first station they stopped at was Elsbridge, to start on Thomas's branch line. Come on, said James. Must make up for lost time. Must make up for lost time. He puffed away again. Come on, James, we can do this, said Rachel, as they did it throughout the whole night. It wasn't long until they reached the last station for the mail run. The last station, it was Wellsworth, Epworth Station. James was very tired, including Rachel. But once they got there was a surprise for them. Hello, chaps, said a voice. James and Rachel knew that voice. It was Howard the helicopter. Hello, James and Rachel. What brings you to Wellsworth? Wait, I thought you were usually at the Social Rescue Center and sometimes at Dryon on Thomas's branch line. Howard chuckled. Oh, I will mostly be at the Social Rescue Center to James, my chap. But I've been transferred to Wellsworth for a few days to check to make sure everything's alright on this side of the island. Besides, said Howard, but what happened if you, James, broke down and I had to take the mail for you? Or even your passengers or anything. What if razor breaks or something? James was cross. That's no way to treat an engine, Howard. You know we're really useful. Plus, said Rachel, me and James and Percy are always busy with the mail at night, so you should really expect that, said Rachel. Oh, said Howard, like I ever would, chaps. Anyways, chaps, mustache has got to check, see if the island's alright on this part of the island. Good day to fellow chaps. And Howard flied away. Show off, said James and Rachel together. None of the engines liked when Howard was being rude to them about engines. When James got back after putting the mail trucks back at the depot and putting Rachel into the yards, she was tired, and so was James. Ivor saw them arriving. He couldn't help himself. You two must have been up early, he said. Ed, gone for a run? No, said James. Me and Rachel, the both of us, were tired. As he passed Ivor, gone into the shed and touched the buffers and fell asleep at once. Later that night at the mail depot, James arrived with Rachel in the mail vans. But Percy was cross. He heard about it last night. James knew Percy doesn't like this. James, why were you late last night? He said crossly. Well, Henry was delayed by the mainland. You know what they're like. And they're going through a rough time at the moment. Huh, said Percy. See, like they always were. Well, maybe Henry was they stopping at his falls or something. I went fast as I could last night, said James. Yes, he did, said Rachel. Until Howard was rude to us. Huh, said Percy. See, I don't matter if Henry's your best friend, but he seriously did cause you delay last night. But that wasn't my fault that Henry was delayed, and it wasn't his fault that he was delayed last night by the mainland. Like I said, they're going through a tough time at the moment, because they have problems. Huh, said Percy. See, whatever. Just then they heard a buzzing noise. It was Howard landing him at the mail depot. Hello, chaps, he said. I got some news to tell you. James was angry. He was still angry at how he said this morning, including Rachel. What news? They said. Didn't you hear they're going to scrap the post train? Said Howard. Well, they said. All over the world, said Howard. They're going to scrap the post train and use me instead. And Howard buzzed off. Post haste. Good day, chaps. And he flew off, delighted with himself. Rubbish, said Percy. If only Henry was not late last night, maybe you would be on time. That's enough about my best friend, Percy, said James crossly. Now, if you want us to be on time, then you should make up for last time if you're being late, said James. Percy just rolled his eyes. With that, all the mail sacks on board both trains. And James is puffed away before Percy says another word about him or Henry or anyone else. Percy soon approached Crosby. Toby was there with the milk train. Hello, Percy, he said. What's with the angry face tonight? He asked. Is that Howard and James? Said Percy, and probably Rachel. Why, what have they done now? Said Toby. Oh, then yesterday night Henry was late coming back from the mainland to deliver for James' mail stuff, which made James run late. Then he got into an argument with Howard this morning, and then we had an argument, and Howard joined it, saying that the post train will be scrapped. And now this is what led to it. Said Toby. I see. Do you think he's right, said Percy? What if he replaced the milk train with you? Toby chuckled. God. There is milk lorries out there, said Toby. But we engines are still useful for something. Like hauling goods or passengers, you know. I suppose you're right, said Percy. See, said Toby, we are useful for something. Besides, no matter what we do, we're still useful to the Fat Controller. You're probably right, Toby, said Percy. I should be happy for that. But there again, said Toby, a lot of steam engines are being scrapped over the years since diesels were made. We may be rare to find, you know. Well, said Percy, we can't be all placed by us. There's a helicopter. There's more of those, Percy. Helicopters can be dangerous at times. Even those steam engines or diesel engines if a kid like controls us or something. Percy, Percy, I know you and James love pulling the mail, but you do have to understand that if they do go along with the idea of Howard taking the mail and including other helicopters, you just have to live with it. I know I have to if I not allowed to take the milk train anymore at night, or even any other jobs, or you're being scrapped to a place or put into a museum. Is what they still go. If they still do the idea, it'll probably be a couple of days for two of you to calm down. But there again, the two of you will still be useful for something. Now, I recommend you don't listen to Howard. You know what he's like. Yes, he's been like that since the both of us had our race years ago, said Percy. But Toby, is Howard right about all these years? Would we all be scrap? Percy, I am at my age, but you young engines, you and other engines like Thomas, for example, may be younger than me, but you're still old. But you're still younger than me. You have more energy and more strength and faster than me, said Toby. I've been around for decades. And I know I know you engines will probably still be surviving today, even if I was out of service. Oh, I still remember the day the Fat Controller came to my old nine and bought me. But still, Percy, I'm sure the Fat Controller would never sell us. He's too kind to sell us. He may get mad at us sometimes when we do something wrong, but he's still our control in the end, and he's still to teach us life lessons. You're right, said Percy. So me and James should have known how from now on. Meanwhile, at Wellsworth, James puffed in with the mail. He was still cross about what Percy said and Harold. Rachel did her best to try and cheer him up, but it was doing no good. While he was dropping off the mail, there was a whistle in the distance. James and Rachel knew that whistle. It was Henry. He was puffing with the flying kipper. He saw James. That was my chance, he said. He poured in smoothly beside his best friend. Hello, James, he said. Oh, hey, Hen, said James crossly. He was still mad about last night. Look, I'm sorry what happened last night, said Henry. But I'm sure you and Rachel did make up for lost time last night. In fact, we didn't, said James. An hour ago, Percy heard about it and he complained it to me. Then Howard came around saying that he was going to take the mail from us, and every helicopter's going to do it. You were probably on the mainland. Anyways, said James. Now I'm just grumpy at Howard. So am I, said Rachel. He shouldn't treat us like that. Yeah, he's been like that for all these years since Percy met him, down at the harbour when they had their race, said James. Henry understood this. Come now, James, said Henry. May it be my fault, you know, said James. But there again, said Henry, you shouldn't really listen to Howard. You two should have ignored him, like what Percy tried to do when they met, said Henry. I always try to ignore him whenever we speak and he's boasting. Sometimes I wish he can change like how we did when we left Emmett sheds, said James. I understand your feeling, James. Not everyone can change, said Henry, like Gordon or something like that. But what's more important, said Henry, we show the Fat Controller how useful we can be. Even if we're not the same as we used to be at Emmett sheds. James and Rachel smiled at the big engine. Thanks, Hen, said James. And no matter what we do, we will still be really useful, even if the Fat Controller still likes us. You see, said Henry, that's the James I know today. Same here, said Rachel. Now we have a mail run to do, and you got a fish train to run. Just don't crash it like what you did last time. Well, I don't have a tank engine with me now, do I? Said Henry cheekily. At Lower Tipmet, Percy was just delivering some more mail sacks when he saw Mandel. He was cold and lonely. He missed his passer train today. Percy's driver spoke to him. "We can give you a lift," said Percy's driver. "Well, you can tell us where you live, and we can try and and Percy can try to bring you how far as he can." "Oh, thank you," said the man. "That will be splendid." Percy was pleased. "Howard might replace us, but as Toby said, it would be still really useful," said Percy, "no matter what." The next morning, James and Rachel were about to pass Wellsworth. They already delivered the mail last night and were just about to pass when they had stopped at a red signal. When they were passing it, they saw Howard, but the problem is, he wasn't flying. The both of them laughed. "Can't fly today, Howard," said James and Rachel together. "The wind's too strong enough, chaps," said Howard. "I am being brought down." "You need to grow aeroplanes, said James. "And maybe you can carry passengers in it to other countries," said Rachel cheekily. The two of them laughed at Howard. Howard now felt sorry for making fun of them yesterday. The signal turned green, and James puffed away with Rachel and the mail train. Later that night, James, Percy, and Rachel were with the mail train as usual. Henry and Toby were also at Knapford with their trains, with the flying kipper and the milk train. The mail train had a delivery for the fat controller. It was a letter from the man that Percy brought home from Lower Tipmet. He read the letter. So he said that both of you are really useful engines into the post train. I've gotten news that the mail depot decided that helicopters won't be used. We could still go by steam engines. Well, engines, mostly. So James and Percy and Rachel will still be useful to the mail train. "That's good," said Rachel happily. "Well done, you guys," said Henry. "See," said Toby, "we won't be replaced after all." And, said the fat controller, he said that the post train is the pride of the line, he said. Everyone was delighted that the post train was not going to get replaced with Percy with Howard. "It seems my advice to James and Rachel did the trick last night," said Henry, "and my advice to Percy also worked," said Toby. "Yes," said Rachel, "now we'll never be replaced." Then Percy spoke to James. "I'm sorry I was rude to you about Henry, since he's your best friend. And I'm sorry that I was running a bit late. You know," said Percy, "we shouldn't get mad over this little thing about running late. Everyone runs late, including getting jealous of another person." "You're right," said James. "Now, let's get back together as good friends, and let's work together as one team with the post train." "Couldn't agree more, James," said Percy. As Henry, Toby, and Rachel watched Percy and James becoming friends again. "I think James and Percy have learned a lesson about their jobs. And I think Howard has also learned his lesson as well. And I think they will never get replaced. Don't you?"